celebration here in France as Alain Le Bleu, they win the World Cup 2018.
She's never been so popular. Meanwhile, in Moscow, right after...
Gianni Infantino, la pipa.
In English, please. Oh, sorry. No.
Yeah, they know how to have fun, but it wasn't all fun and games, though. You might have seen some of the images of last night. As the evening went on, the party got a little out of hand in some parts of Paris, with riot police deployed. Yeah, but back to the more important things. Before the high-stakes game, fans of both teams were giving it their all, supporting their side, trying to give them their edge, because it's not all about winning it on the pitch, it's also about winning it on the stands and before the kick-off. Neil, the football on the
2014 war, it hit several dozen Hamas targets after more than 200 mortars and rockets were fired by Palestinian militants at Israeli communities living along the Gaza border. 2 Palestinian teenagers were killed, 3 Israelis were injured. In the early hours of Sunday morning, Egypt managed to broker a truce, but the situation remains extremely tense, with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowing to continue to hit hard.
During the Sabbath, we hit Hamas hard. Our policy is clear. When anyone seeks to harm us, we will strike back with great force. That is what we did yesterday. The IDF dealt Hamas the most devastating blow since the Gaza war of 2014. I hope that they got the message. If not, they will get it later.
Israeli officials insist that the ceasefire includes a cessation of all arson attacks. Over the past few months, there have been thousands of balloons and kites attached to bombs and other explosives that have been flown into Israel. These have resulted in hundreds of fires on farmland and also on nature reserves, resulting in the destruction of tens of thousands of dunams of land. There is growing pressure by the Israeli public on the military and the government to do something.
Let's be clear, a ceasefire where terrorists continue to strike us is no deterrence at all. It's a surrender. The Justice Minister will oppose in the cabinet any ceasefire that allows Hamas to rearm itself.
This tit-for-tat of airstrikes and rocket launches is a significant flare-up in an already volatile situation. Since March the 30th, more than 130 Palestinians have been killed in almost weekly clashes along the Israel-Gaza border. And just this past Friday, thousands more descended there, resulting in the death of a 15-year-old Palestinian boy and an Israeli soldier being injured. In a rare admission, Hamas has said that it launched rockets at Israel as a warning and also as a deterrent to stop Israel sending rockets.
The resistance exercised its right to defend the Palestinians and to face up the Israeli aggressors who made martyrs of children by conducting airstrikes against Gaza. International mediators helped broker a ceasefire, but the Hamas position is that the occupation started this aggression and has to stop it. Calmness from the occupiers would be met by calmness from our side. But anytime the Zionists commit acts of aggression against Gaza, there will be a direct response from the resistance.
For some time, Israel has been focused on its northern border and preventing the establishment of an Iranian military presence in Syria. The government is wary to escalate tensions in Gaza. But Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is under increasing pressure, particularly from these Gaza border communities, to deal with the situation there. Paul Islier, RT, Tel Aviv.
We spoke to political commentator Amir Oren. He thinks that both sides are to blame for the latest escalation.
Well, Hamas does not recognize Israel. It does not even recognize the Oslo agreements, which created the Palestinian Authority. Hamas has more of its share of blame. But Israel, too, is not blameless because rather than come out with some initiative or at least take upon it a serious consideration of the so-called Saudi peace initiative, it is trying to stall. And while it is stalling, more and more settlements are being built in the West Bank, and the chances for a deal between Israel and the Palestinians get slimmer by the day. So yes, there's enough blame to go around, and even though Hamas should take the largest share, Israel too has to answer for it.
Nations and add some common sense in bilateral relations. And over the days preceding the summit, Trump has already called Putin a competitor and said that the US was, quote, tougher on Russia than anybody. At the same time, he also repeatedly stated that if we could develop a relationship, it would be good for Russia and good for us and good for everyone. On Sunday, in fact, the US president told CBS that he is going into today's meeting with, quote, low expectations. He added that, quote, nothing bad is going to come out of it and maybe some good will come out of it. Now, some of the issues expected to be discussed at today's historic summit in Helsinki, Syria. How many more cards do certain Western powers have to play in Syria, with jihadists and proxy armies on the back foot and scattered in remnants of the country? The denuclearization of North Korea, that is also expected to be part of the discussion as well. And of course, Iran. What will be next for Iran after the US president only weeks ago said the United States no longer supports the Iran nuclear deal, even though the International Atomic Energy Agency has said repeatedly that Iran is complying with its nuclear deal. So the live pictures right here, Helsinki International Airport. The Russian president is on that plane preparing for today's historic summit. Now, just a quick reminder here, Vladimir Putin landing here in Helsinki, the meeting with Donald Trump there. Donald Trump has already met with Finland's president. In fact, the two had breakfast together along with Melania Trump, who is accompanying her husband on his Europe trip. Now, although the summit with Putin hasn't begun yet, some sectors of the media are already in full alert panic mode, just as they were when Trump and Putin first met last year.
Unlikely that the president will confront Putin.
He's going to convey to Putin that he's weak.
From what is now our American perspective, how has he earned a face-to-face, full-scale, bilateral meeting with the U.S. president?
The president's trip abroad will also include a meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin.
Important for the leaders of these two countries to meet. I'd like to hear someone say that's a bad idea.
Bad idea.
When he goes to this NATO conference, who will he represent? Will he represent the United States, or will he represent Moscow?
The former KGB colonel in the Kremlin could be doing some important intelligence gathering on his American counterpart.
People are terrified. The best case scenario is a scenario where basically nothing terrible happens.
All right, let's bring you back into live pictures right now from Helsinki International Airport. There is the presidential motorcade for Vladimir Putin, the Russian president. Now it's making its way towards Putin's presidential plane that you see right now on your screen. The moving stairway has just been approached towards the airplane, and we are standing by for the Russian president to start to descend those steps. As we've mentioned earlier, Trump has said as early as Monday morning that the relationship with Russia has never been worse, thanks to many years of U.S. foolishness and stupidity. In fact, earlier, the U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said that the prospect of improving ties between Moscow and Washington is in Russia's hands. Quote, a better relationship with the Russian government would benefit all, but the ball is in Russia's court. An interesting comment there coming from Mike Pompeo, the U.S. Secretary of State, as the U.S. media, the Democrat group, and also some of the Republicans in Washington, some of them there, are in panic mode as the Russian president is preparing to meet with his American counterpart. There should be a list of topics for the discussion here as the presidential delegation now is disembarking from the airplane. The Iran nuclear deal, that is expected to be certainly part of the discussion. Israel's going to have some input with this as well. Of course, Israel not attending this meeting, but Israel is pretty well entrenched in Syria as it tries to battle Iranian Hezbollah in Syria. Also, the denuclearization of North Korea as well. That's going to be an issue that is expected to be discussed. As we stand by now, the door is opening on Putin's presidential plane as the Russian president now prepares to come and meet the delegation standing by at Helsinki International Airport. Putin's spokesman Dmitry Peskov insists that the Russian leader is pragmatic enough to accept Donald Trump, placing U.S. national interests above all else, but to build a mutually beneficial relationship, he expects his counterpart to respect Russia. Peskov saying, quote, this is what we hope to achieve at today's summit. We hope this will be a baby step towards overcoming the current critical situation in our bilateral relations. So ultimately, the eyes of the world are right now on the Finnish capital, where the leaders of the two world powers are due to meet in just about an hour or so. A day earlier, Trump stressed he's going into today's meeting with rather low expectations, adding that, quote, nothing bad is going to come out of it. In fact, maybe something good will come out of it. Cup wrapping up in Russia. Of course, France winning the World Cup, and Putin being involved with various ceremonial award ceremonies and diplomatic gestures after the World Cup. God only knows what time the Russian president went to bed last night, but he's finally arrived here in Helsinki. It's right now turning 1:10 in the afternoon. It is 29 degrees Celsius there in Helsinki, and off comes the jacket. It's got to be a hot day. There he is, the Russian president now getting into his cortege limousine here. So let's get back now to Jonathan Steele, our international affairs commentator, joining us here live on the program as we fade away from these live pictures at Helsinki International Airport. Jonathan Steele, thanks for joining us here. Your expectations of today's meeting, do you think today's summit could yield any new cooperation agreements?
Well, I think if it simply agrees to have regular meetings and regular summits and regular meetings between the two countries' secretaries of state and foreign ministers, that would be a step forward. What we want is, I think, a normalization of relations between two enormous countries, enormously powerful countries. This kind of attempt to put one of them in the dock all the time or isolate them or sanction them all the time doesn't help in international relations. Even if you have differences of agreement between countries, you still have to keep talking. You should still have to keep talking.
Now, Jonathan, as we know, 12 Russians have been charged with hacking offences linked to the 2016 presidential election. This is, this is recent news here in the past week or so. Do you think Mr. Trump will raise the issue today with his Russian counterpart.